Okay, welcome everyone. Today we will be talking about some typical problems of rural areas and problems of rural development in Nigeria. Like it's our tradition, we try to um, discuss or say or explain some of the things that we have talked about before now. Last time we talked about the implementation appraisal of rural development programs and all that, financing, as well as some indigenous rural financing organization. And we highlighted a whole lot concerning that topic. You can go to our platform and you'll be able to watch it. All right, you can get yourself acquainted with that. Okay, today we're talking about some typical problems of rural areas. Okay, some typical problems of rural areas. I I usually like to say as well, some students are having difficulty navigating through our live session as well as joining in the discussion forum and participating in the platform activities. For those that are finding it very easy or that have surmounted this challenge, please copy the link for live classes and share in other platforms. Take the live recordings or the recordings on our YouTube page and school portal and share with your mates so that they can join us. This semester is moving really fast and people are attempting their TMAs now. Uh, and you can't attempt the TMAs if you don't participate in discussion forums. So it's important we carry and work together, carry ourselves along and work together. So today we're expecting that every student that participates here or watches this video after now will be able to first and foremost identify the typical problems of rural areas before attempting to explain them. We're expecting that after going through this session, every student should be able to, in details, discuss the concept of rural development and its meaning to a market woman. We're expecting that every student should be able to identify also the problems of rural development in Nigeria, unique problems to Nigeria. We also have problems that are unique to other places, but today we're talking about problems of rural development in Nigeria. Every student after this session should be able to explain this. Okay. Now, even though there are different areas and they have their unique challenges, all right, their unique problems. Generally, the typical problems that are common to rural areas uh, that affect the socioeconomic life of the inhabitants are quite we can call them generic, sort of. That is, one problem that affects rural people in Nigeria could affect rural people in other countries, all right? Because the rural areas come with unique characteristics that are similar to each places where you find rurality. Now, such problems accumulate in rural urban drift. That is, people tend to want to start moving from the rural areas to the urban areas because, in quotes, the urban areas tend to have the solution to the problem they have in the rural area, tend to have mitigated that problem. For example, you see in the rural areas, you have low capacity, low price for labor. When people are skilled and they try to use their skill in the rural area, they pay them less. But when you go to the urban area with the same skill, you are paid more. For example, a skilled teacher in the rural area attempts to carry out maybe a private extramural class for students, and you're asking people to pay you maybe 10,000 per child, 15,000 per child, and what are you? People are there telling you, no, they can pay 5,000. Yet we have people in Lekki that are paid 200,000, 300,000, even close to 600,000 to teach their students or to teach pupils uh, exactly the same thing you have the skill to teach. Probably is to teach them mathematics, to teach them physics, to teach them chemistry, and some unique courses like that. Now, you as a teacher in the village, they pay you very busy for that skill. But when you move down to such areas like the urban area, they pay you more. So you see, because of that, a lot of people tend to drift towards the urban area, then leaving the rural areas uh, without skill, their personalities or persons. Okay, so such problems tend to accumulate, and we said they accumulate towards a drift towards the urban area and other they and once people are drifting they go with various issues. Okay, people carry their problems from one place to another place. People from people that are inherently in their own place start experiencing challenges that those that are coming in are bringing to them. So we'll be discussing the typical problems of rural areas so that rural dwellers will take cognizance of them in their development effort. Okay, now let's itemize some of these typical problems of rural areas. The first on our list is low income and employment. Low income and employment are among the main problems inherent in rural areas. They emerge in several aspects. The first way low income and employment emerge, the way you experience them mostly, is through the problem with the labor force. I just told you about labor force, low labor productivity, low price of agricultural product. You see, this same product will move from the rural area to the urban area and people pay more for them. But yet, when they are in the rural areas, people tend to price them low and refuse to pay for them. So this is a typical problem of rural areas. Now, we also have a typical feature of rural areas is the surplus of labor force due to fewer jobs that are open. You see your friends and yourself, you all are in your area, maybe in your various areas now, some of you in rural areas, and you are taking the same course, you are learning through this online session, and you are gaining skills. Yet, in your locality, people can't pay for your skill. Probably those that need the skills are fewer than those of you that have it. And that is what we mean by surplus of labor force due to fewer jobs that are open. So this is the situation. Now, another typical problem is most new jobs are for unskilled workers in rural areas. Most new jobs are for unskilled workers in rural areas. So the wages and the nature of the work are unattractive. You see that? So the kind of money they were willing to pay is unattractive. That way, those that are skilled tend to move towards areas where they are paid more. The next is workers with higher qualification migrate to cities. All right, workers with higher skills sets, higher qualification tend to migrate to the cities because that is where they will be paid. That is where their skill is required. All right, like now, if you become a programmer and you are in a rural area, and in that rural area they just have maybe two viewing centers where they watch football, a typical rural market setting, primary schools, a health center, well, one or two good roads, a lot of farms, and a lot of poultry, and all that, and all that. Now, how can you, as a programmer, earn with that skill, with such qualification in such a place? So you see, the workers with higher qualification like that, with such high skill like that, tend to migrate to cities. Of course, in the city, you see organizations that require you to do some coding for them in course of their job. It's just normal, it's just a routine for them, and they're willing to pay. They're even looking for you. So sticking in the rural area tends to be an issue. And you moving from the rural area to the city is presents another atypical problem of rural area as we are talking about it now. Okay, let's move to the next. Now, these problems can be solved by creating more employment opportunities and extra income for the people of the rural area or the region. Now, poor problems of labor force are most serious and difficult to solve. I know in your mind you ask, why is that so? Problems of labor force are the most serious and difficult to solve because they affect people with their skills, initiative, and opportunities. You want to solve the problem of a programmer in a rural area. He studied in maybe Unilag and he comes to a local village in maybe in a State or in a Bayelsa State. And he's a programmer, for God's sake. He has tested his skills when he went for his IT program in NNPC, and they used his skills. He used that skill in a very high paying job in Lagos, and sometimes he used it again in somewhere in Benin, and he worked. And now you ask him to sit in his village in a state or in Bayelsa. No, he won't stay there. So it's a difficult thing to solve because everyone that has this high skill, high initiative, will seek opportunity. All right, we seek opportunities where they are required. Of course, most of you are aware of the Japa syndrome that has been on for a while now, although it's slowing down in Nigeria, where most people, both skilled, unskilled, were moving off to other countries. You see, it's a problem, but it can be solved. Now, beside unemployment, another problem is the depopulation of the rural areas and the drastic aging process. You see, because those that are really doing this movement are people that are young, that is skilled ones, energetic ones, those in their prime. You find out that they move out of the rural areas and then leave the rural areas with just the poor ones, not just poor, the aged ones, those that can't move, those that can't migrate like that, and such depopulates the rural area. All right. So these are some typical problems of rural areas, and it's important to highlight them and understand them. Now, while we are doing this, have it behind your mind, have it somewhere in your mind that after we are done with this, you should try to explain this concept or these itemized items we just listed down to someone that is not even educated. Try and explain it. If you can do that, then you've understood it. Okay. Sometimes, like we are still on the typical problem, sometimes the purchasing price of items can be an issue. I mentioned that earlier. A man sells a tuber of yam in the village to whoever is willing to buy because of demand and supply pressure. He sells that tuber of yam 800 naira, 1000 naira. Now, the same tuber of yam, when moved to the city, is sold for 2005, 4000 to between 2005 and 4000 naira. You see, what it simply says is that purchasing prices are typically low in the rural areas compared to the urban area. You see it, and mostly affects agricultural products. Mostly affects agricultural products. Now, to solve this problem, at least partially, many farmers are trying to increase their income by processing the raw materials and the production of finished products. That is closing the production cycle. What does that really mean? Now, in the typical village, like I was coming from Bayelsa some few days ago, I saw a lot of plantain chips being sold along the way. The locals were selling it. Yet I still saw people selling plantain, freshly cut plantain. They had a whole lot around that area. Meaning, when people come to buy the plantain, because the plantain is so many and it's a rural area, they tend to price it lowly. So the people may have said, oh, a whole bunch of plantain that people are pricing for 1,005, 1,000 is rather too cheap at that rate. So they decide not to even sell it. They just go buy granite oil and then fry it and stand by the express and sell it as plantain chips. That's what we mean by the locals trying to gain or increase their income by processing those produce, processing it so they can earn more. So that way, they buy the plant. People buy that plantain chips at maybe 100 naira, 200 naira, and they make times two or times three of what they would have made if they sold the plantain in bunches, in bunches. All right. Now, so in many regions, it's not. Many farmers have not really developed cooperation in solving their problems. So they typically are earning low from their producers. Okay. So I hope you're getting the point. Note your questions because I will soon allow you unmute yourself to ask, and I will ask my own question. Now, the second group of problems is associated with working and living conditions in the rural areas due to underdeveloped infrastructure and public services. The current state of the infrastructure facility in the rural areas, such as maybe the roads, the school system, the communication network a few days ago. Just even this morning, I got an SMS from one of the major network providers and they're apologizing for poor services So some of those things can be really totally absent in rural areas. Poor sewage system, poor water system, poor electricity. Okay, very poor infrastructural facilities in rural areas. This could be another typical problem of the rural area. This situation, together with low quality of health, education, and is the main reason for people's migration or the depopulation of rural areas. Okay, now solving this problem is possible through close cooperation with local government authorities, which make um, which make efficient the use of opportunity provided by international donors, cooperation with other governmental agencies to bring about regional development in some areas. For example, we are aware of certain donors that provided maybe solar powered water boreholes in some rural areas, and some local governments that are providing, or no, not local government, state governments that are providing smart schools in rural areas, good roads, and all that. These are to bridge this gap. This is just trying to solve this problem of infrastructure deficit in the rural areas. Okay, now another problem is economic insecurity generated by realization of agricultural production. You know, when you have economic insecurity, it means that I am afraid I cannot afford certain things. I'm afraid I cannot earn better from what I'm doing, maybe my agricultural endeavors, my farming activities. I'm afraid. So the market economy mechanism increases the role of supply and demand as factors that dictate the price of agricultural products. And by the realization of these, the farmer is afraid, is insecure because his agricultural product is not earning him as much as he expects. He's working really hard, but it's not getting enough. So this is another problem of economic insecurity. Now, the adverse nature or the adverse natural conditions are also a factor for inconsistency in people's income. You know, state of the environment further reduces the quality of life. Some people live in areas where they are prone to natural disasters, some natural issues, some issues that are going to affect their health and how they live. Like I was in an area where they live very close to the ocean, and as the rain is increasing, the water is taking over their farmlands, is submerging their crops, meaning that the crops can't do well when it's waterlogged, when there's flooding and all that. These are natural issues they cannot do much about because that's just how it is. The ocean overflows its bank. When the rain falls, there are flooding, and these are issues, and they typically bring economic insecurity for the people in the rural areas. All right. So sometimes this pollution, pesticides can't work, or pesticides has caused a lot of erosion from the soil and all that. These are issues for rural areas. Now, let's talk about problems of rural development in Nigeria. Now we are trying to focus down to what is unique to Nigeria. Before we go into the problems of rural development in Nigeria, let's define rural development again. I remember we defined it when we started this series, and we mentioned a whole lot. But now let's define it again so that we can be acquainted with it again. If you forget anything along these our teaching lines, don't forget the definition of rural development. Remember, this course is generally about rural development. So if you can't define rural development, then you have not started. Now, the first definition we have here is that rural development can be viewed as the development of moral, social, political, and economic potentialities of the rural communities to enhance their self-reliance through the provision of appropriate infrastructure, such as fiber water, electricity, good roads, and small-scale industries, increasing their political consciousness and participation, promoting their moral and social well-being, which will result in tolerance, good discipline, justice, fairness, kindness, love, and peace. So you see that that is a handful to memorize. However, let's see another definition. Another definition says rural development is the process of making life more satisfying and fulfilling for millions of people who live in the rural areas. You see it. So if we put these two together, the very long, elongated definition and the short definition, it becomes really clear what rural development is. One, rural development is a process and its intention is to bring satisfaction and fulfillment of people in the rural areas. But how? By developing, by improving their moral, their social, their political, and economic potentialities, which eventually should liberate them and bring about tolerance, good discipline, fairness, satisfaction to a large extent, even love and peace. So you see it. This is what rural development is all about. Now, what are the typical problems of rural development in Nigeria? Now we are zeroing down to Nigeria as a country. Now, authors have defined or listed some of them. The first here is one, approaches to rural development in Nigeria have been ad hoc in nature. As some of you may have, what is the meaning of ad hoc? You can use your phone and you search it and find out the meaning. But however, let's give a typical illustration of what ad hoc is. Now, when they organize sports, a lot of us like sports. Organize maybe the National Sports Festival and all that. And then the Ministry of Sports and Youth Development employs people to work with them for that few days, few weeks that sports festival is going on. We say they are ad hoc staff. They are not permanent staff, but they are ad hoc staff, meaning they will just work for a few period and their employment is taken away from them. So in that same light, with that same illustration in your mind, look at rural development, like the approach that Nigeria is taking towards bringing about rural development is that temporal. That's what it means in nature, and it can be a problem. Remember when we looked at the definition earlier, it said rural development is a process. And if you go about rural development temporarily, you will not achieve anything. You see, rural development is a process. And if it's a process, it means that it goes step by step by step. After this, after this, after this. That way, you can bring about the development eventually. Are you seeing it? So, but when rural development approach is ad hoc, it does not complete the cycle or the process, and the rural development does not finally happen. So, number two, there is rural development programs in Nigeria lacks the rudiments of long-term planning. You see this? It's related to number one in a way. And number three, most designs and implementation stages of rural development projects in Nigeria appeal only to the political needs of the ruling class. Now, I want you to think about number three because we'll discuss it now. Once you unmute yourself, I'm going to be asking you number three. How does the implementation stages of rural development project in Nigeria appeal only to the political needs of the rural class? Think about it while I keep talking because we are going to discuss this in a few minutes' time. Number three, I didn't want to talk much about it because we will talk about it. You're going to tell me what you think before I tell you eventually what this really means. Number four here says some of the rural development projects are white elephant projects that do not address the felt needs of the rural people. I laugh. When we say white elephant project, we're talking about projects that are just massive and they are not achieving much. They're just there to kind of attract attention, but what are they really supposed to be achieving? White elephant project. They're not going directly to solve a felt need. They're just trying to show off with such projects. Number five, most rural development programs are geared towards agricultural matters only. And we cannot but say this because the rural areas are basically dependent on agriculture as a means of livelihood. Most rural development programs tend to target agriculture, and it can be a problem because in some rural areas, agriculture is not even their problem. To bring about development, their security is their issue. Some people battle with issues of banditry, insecurity, and all that. Headers and farmer clashes. So they're not even agriculture, they are farming, they are fine with it. They can even go get tractors and all that, but they get people attack them, steal their product, their animals, livestock, and all that. Number six, inadequate extension and research facility militates against rural development efforts in Nigeria. Now, what you'll notice is that if you go to Europe and the Americas, you find out that the percentage of those that are farming and feeding the entire continent are very few. They could just be less than 5% of the continent. They are less than 3% of the continent. Why? Because they've adapted improved way of doing their farming activities. And that has brought about improved feeding arrangement, feeding produces and all that. But when we say in Nigeria here, we have inadequate extension and research facilities. Why? Because the research facility and the research program has failed. It's supposed to be ongoing. If you go to some Ministry of Agriculture here, they don't even do anything like extension anymore. Extension simply means, for those that don't know, is taking knowledge from where it is domiciled to where it is needed. So you take a particular disease of a particular plant, take it to the lab, take it to the research institute and say, this yam is experiencing this kind of disease. They go into investigation, find out the cause of the disease, find out the solution of the disease, and they have the solution in the lab, in the research institute. But no extension program to take that information from where it is domiciled to the people that are farming in the rural areas, so that they stop losing their yam to that disease. And of course, most times, like the one we experienced somewhere in the east some time ago, some crops had what we call armyworm attack them. After the people have lost a lot of maize for that season before they now got a wind of the real solution to solving armyworm attack. So you see, inadequate extension and research facility militates against rural development in Nigeria. Now, number 7 is some of the rural development projects are planned and implemented without adequate data. Let me tell you the truth. Data, they say, one of the communication network communication provider in Nigeria say data is life. Of course, we understand what they mean. Doesn't mean that data gives you life per se, but it helps you live a more quality and enduring life. For example, you want to get married. Let's use that as an illustration. You don't ask any question. You don't gather information about the person you want to get married to. You end up getting into problems. Like in a typical situation in the East, here, you want to get married, your parents you may not even know it. And that's what fathers do for their children. You say, Daddy, this man wants to marry me. The man will say, okay, where do you say he's from? He says from so and so place. Oh, what is that their name again? You say, okay, it's all right, it's all right. When you are ready, let us know. Tell him I would like to see him. And then the young man is planning to come to see your father, not knowing that your father has taken the next available vehicle, bike, and gone to the guy's village, sit down in the nearest bar, and he's discussing with the guys drinking 1 or 2 bottles and asking them, this family, how do you see them? And people are explaining to him what is happening in that family. Do you know what he's doing? He's gathering data, he's gathering information. And when he comes back, you say, my daughter, you can go and marry there. Some will come back and say, don't you ever go there. And then you say, what is the problem? And it gives you so much information. It's called data. The same way, you can't go to a rural area to implement a particular plan, a rural development project, without adequate data. You'll be firing blank. So it's a typical problem. It's a typical problem. Number 8 here says wrong policy statements that render developmental projects and programs ineffective. That can be a problem as well. Number 9 says negative attitude of rural dwellers. I remember in one of our sessions, I explained the issue of negative attitude of rural dwellers. Of course, that is why rural development is necessary, because it's supposed to bring about change in morals and attitude in the way the rural people behave. So the negative attitude is not a surprise. It is a problem nonetheless. Number 10, embezzlement and corruption. Most issues with rural projects, the finances earmarked for it is being embezzled, misappropriated, and by reason of corruption, they render the whole program ineffective or lack results. Okay, this is number 10. So that is about it for what we're talking about today. So let's go now to our discussion. I said we're discussing number 3 of the problem. Most designs and implementation strategies of rural development projects in Nigeria appeal only to the political needs of the ruling class. Now it's time for us to discuss this. Now, I want to ask a question for those that can say something. If you're on YouTube, you will answer it on the comment section, all right? Dan, tell me what you think. Why is it that most designs of rural development projects, most implementation strategies of rural development projects in Nigeria typically appeal only to the political needs of the ruling class. I think I should start asking questions and calling names. For those of you, if you can put up your hand, I will ask you. Let me see those that are online. I can see Blessing. Okay. Esther. Yakubu. Okay, Yakubu, can you attempt it? Tell us why most of the rural development projects in Nigeria appeals to the political needs of the ruling class. I hope Yakubu can hear me. Oh, Yakubu is not online. Okay. Ifoma, you are putting up your hand. You can make an attempt now. Unmute yourself.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir. Yes. So, from what I understand, I think the politicians make such projects when election is close to gather more votes. Not necessarily what the people need at that time. Probably the people need water. The politicians might go for bridges which the people don't need. So they only do it to gather more votes, not that they are doing it for the interest of the people.
Good. Well, that is very good. That is very good. Of course, that is the interest. You know, the politicians do things for show. They do things for show. A few politicians do things for the real reason of development. A lot of them do it for show. Of course, you are aware of the fact that when election comes, you see a politician on this roadside helping a woman or eating corn that is roasted by the roadside, joining the people in a park to maybe eat granite, to clear the grass, which is like playing to the gallery. They don't normally do that. One of the politicians put his child in one of the primary schools locally in his environment. He's a governor, actually. And we were wondering whether by putting your child there, you will not be endangering other people's children. Because with the number of security that comes with that child, others will not concentrate to study. You see it? Now, we talked about White Elephant Project. They engage in projects that are flamboyant, that people can see. You know, there are some rural development projects that you can't really see. You can't see it, but it is happening. Let me give you an example. There's a particular project that I was talking to one of the professors in my school, and he was talking about a particular person that went into a rural area that is always flooded with water during the rainy season. And what does she usually do? She used to take what they call it, this make a makeshift classroom into that place to an area where they don't have flooding, and then help the children that are in the flooded areas to come to school there and study in and accommodate them, and they build something that is temporary for them so that they don't just lose the academic session or academic STEM that period. And you see that you can't see it clearly because you don't even know she's doing it because she's not a politician, but yet it has a lot of effect. Esther, you want to say something, please? You may talk at this point. Sorry, I'm not supposed to be talking so much. Esther.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Esther.
Okay, most times I want to add to that number 3 to what Ifeoma said.
Okay.
Most times when they are approaching, when they want to do election, they will speak, they will give promises of what they are going to do after they are elected. But at the end of it, they might sit all through the tenure without achieving what they actually said.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
You know, it's what it is. That is how it is. You know, politics is not my thing, but I have come to understand that politics is more complicated than just running for an election. Most times people run for an election, they tend to promise a whole lot, not knowing the real situation of things on ground. When I go there, I will build this. When I go there, I will stop this. When I go there, I will go there. When I go there, I will come here. They eventually get into office and realize that they can't achieve all the things they've said. And then they use white elephant projects to persuade or to persuade the people to vote them again. There's one of my colleagues that talked about someone that came into office and tried to stop certain things, and his boss told him, "Oga, leave that thing, or you can't stop it. It's going to be very difficult." He said, "We stop it," and he tried stopping it. And what did they experience? He said, "Oga, if you stop that thing now, they will start shooting here. If you stop that thing here, these people will go on strike. If you stop that thing here, this one will start happening here." And the guy looked at the complicated nature of the situation, and he said, he tried though, eventually he left it. So people now said, you promised, you promised. At the end of the day, he couldn't do it. We can't say it's impossible for politicians to achieve all they want to achieve, but sometimes it can be really very hard. So that is why implementation of rural development projects can be really hard for them, given that they need to be vying for election again and again. It is their trouble. It's not ours. Ours in the class is to point out what the issues are. Most designs and implementation of rural development projects in Nigeria appeals to the political class because they use it periodically for their own gain. For their own gain. All right. Okay. Now, these are the problems of rural development in Nigeria. I don't know if you have questions. You can unmute yourself or put up your electronic hands, like they say, and ask questions for those that have questions. If you have a question, you can put up your hand and ask. Any questions, please? Okay. Esther, you can speak.
Okay, sir. Please, I want to ask, can we also use this ad hoc as like, can we replace it with contract?
Okay, for those that are in this context.
Yes, sir.
In this context, when we say ad hoc, approaches to rural development have become ad hoc in nature. No, we can't say it's contract because the approach actually is not being contracted really. It's just the timing. It's not, we say rural development is a process. Like if you see the definition we have here, we say rural development can be viewed as development of the moral, social, political, economic potentialities of the rural people. You can't go into doing such in a one-off kind of in a one-off kind of program. You must do it continuously. That's why the next definition there says rural development is a process. So it is that process of bringing about the development of moral, social, and political and economic potentiality of the people that is rural development. Is a process. So when you now engage rural development as you just do one thing and run away, do one thing and run away. No, it has to be a process. If you are targeting to bring about moral development of the people, follow it step by step until you see that moral development has happened. If you are talking about bringing about improving the social environment, the political environment, the economic, let's use economic because that one is quite easy to tell. People in this environment are abjectly poor, and you are intending to improve their economic life. You take it, first of all, maybe you start with education because there's nothing that beats education. No, people say school and scam, school and scam. I don't know how they came to that conclusion. Poverty of the mind is the highest of poverty. So you start with educating the people's mind. Tell them things that will liberate their thinking before you now show them the way of being economically improved. That way, with their exposed mind, they learn a new way of getting economically improved. They can sustain it. There was a story I heard. I saw it on I don't know, on social media, where a group of people in a rural community in Africa, I don't know the particular country, they saw solar panels that has been installed to provide them water to power a borehole. And then they said the local juju man told them that the, the, the white man has come to put something in their village to stop the rain from falling. And what he said they put was those solar panels. And so the people took sticks, cutlasses, and went and broke down the solar panel that was supposed to bring them water to power their water, their borehole. I don't know the kind of poverty of the mind that can empower people to do such things. Because if the water is running and the panels are the ones bringing power to power it, and then your talisman or the juju man says that is the gods or the people that are planning to stop the rain from falling, I don't know how you relate it, that the panels will stop the rain from falling. In truth, they don't even understand what the panel does. And that is what education, the lack of education can cause. Do you get my point? So if they were educated and then you now show them a way of making money, a way of being socially improved, a way of being politically improved, they sustain that way. If you go to the US, they tell you that if you don't train your children in primary school, they have a name, they call it there, they will send you to prison because the uneducated is ungovernable. You see that? So that is the core of what we are talking about here. When you say ad hoc, it means that the approach to rural development just comes once in a while. You're trying to educate the people, you give them education. After a while, you leave them without education. Like a particular environment I know. Today they have a nurse and a doctor in their health center. After 2, 3, 4 months, no doctor, no nurse again. The people go back to traditional way of treating their sick and all that. After a while, you see one doctor again. How can the health of the people improve in such a place? How can you change the mindset of the people without having a health professional trying to change their approach to their health? That is a ad hoc approach because the people can't, the government, the environment, the government doesn't mean just government in the day. Local governments, the village government, the leaders, everybody around them can sustain a health professionals, whether it's a community health worker, nurses, doctors, those that will help to improve the health of the people. They can't sustain. So such a rural development project is ad hoc. It's supposed to be continuous. That's what I think. All right. Any other question? Any other question, please? All right. Now, for those that have not attempted their TMAs, do you have anybody that has not attempted his or her TMAs here? If you have, tell me what your challenge is in this class so that we can sort it so everybody can hear it at the same time. Is there anybody? Okay, so since there's nobody, we will call it a day today. All right, thank you guys for joining. I looking forward to seeing you in our next class. For those that have not joined the WhatsApp group, join. We pass a lot of information there. If you've not subscribed to our YouTube page, please do so. Please do so. We appreciate it. And make comments, share some of the things that we are posting there to other of your classmates so that they can be part of it. So there's a link I set in the chat box. You can go there and be part of it. All right. All right. Thank you for joining. Esther, you want to ask a question? Please speak. Your hand is up. Esther. Hello, Esther. You can speak. Oh. It's all right.